The melody in the night. In an old crumbling neighborhood tucked away in the heart of a bustling city, there stood an abandoned mansion that had long been forgotten by time. Once the pride of the area with its exquisite French architecture and sprawling, meticulously maintained gardens, the mansion had now become a decaying corpse, wrapped in a shroud of ivy and overgrown with weeds. For years, the residents of the neighborhood had whispered ghostly tales about the mansion. They spoke of the eerie sound of a piano playing on moonless nights, a haunting melody filled with sorrow, like the mournful cry of a woman in despair. No one could say for certain where the music came from, but everyone believed the mansion was haunted by the spirit of a pianist who had died there many years ago. The mansion had once belonged to Mr. Ashford, the patriarch of one of the most wealthy and powerful families in the area. Mr. Ashford had a daughter named Emily, renowned for her delicate beauty and prodigious talent on the piano. Her music was said to captivate anyone who heard it, and every evening, the entire neighborhood would fall silent to listen to the enchanting melodies that drifted from the mansion. But one fateful day, everything changed. Emily died suddenly and mysteriously within the walls of her family's home. Her death sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, but no one knew the true cause. Some whispered that she had taken her own life after a failed romance. Others believed she had succumbed to a rare, undiagnosed illness. Whatever the truth, Emily's death left a wound in Mr. Ashford's heart that would never heal. In the years that followed, Mr. Ashford became a recluse, refusing to leave the mansion and descending into madness until his own death. After his passing, the mansion was left to rot, and no one dared venture near it, fearing the ghostly piano that played each night. One evening, a group of university students, driven by curiosity and skepticism, decided to explore the mansion to uncover the truth behind the terrifying stories. They were young, eager, and confident that the tales of ghosts were nothing more than old superstitions. Leading the group was James, an architecture student with a passion for exploring old, forgotten buildings. Accompanying him were his girlfriend, Sarah, and two close friends, Tom and Lucy. The group chose a moonless night to visit the mansion, believing it to be the best time to experience the infamous piano music for themselves. Armed with flashlights and a video camera, they set out on their daring adventure. As they approached the mansion, they were greeted by a decaying facade, cracked walls, moss-covered stonework, and a massive wooden door that looked as though it hadn't been opened in decades. The old iron gate at the front of the property was rusted and almost immovable, but James pushed against it with all his strength until it creaked open, emitting a bone-chilling sound that echoed through the overgrown garden. The group stepped inside, immediately feeling the oppressive cold that seemed to emanate from the house. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the distant chirping of insects only heightened their unease. As they made their way toward the mansion, the front door, once grand and imposing, now hung ajar, barely held in place by rusted hinges. James shone his flashlight inside, revealing a grand but dust-covered foyer. The air inside was heavy, and the remnants of a forgotten era were scattered about, tattered drapes, crumbling furniture, and paintings that had long since lost their luster. "Are we really going in there?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling in the eerie silence. "We came here to explore, didn't we?" James replied, trying to sound confident, though a shiver ran down his spine. They stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath their feet as they crossed the foyer and headed toward the staircase that led to the upper floors. Every step they took seemed to reverberate through the house, as if the very walls were groaning in protest. Tom turned to look at Lucy, who clung to his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Are you scared already? It's just an old house," Tom teased, though he too felt an inexplicable dread. As they reached the top of the stairs, a long, dark hallway stretched out before them. Their flashlights revealed several closed doors, each one appearing to hide some terrible secret behind it. They cautiously opened each door, finding nothing but empty, dust-choked rooms filled with the debris of a bygone era. But when they reached the final door at the end of the hallway, James noticed something different. The door was intricately carved with a design that seemed almost alive, and when he pushed it open, a soft, mournful creak echoed through the air. Inside was a large room dominated by a grand piano that stood in the center, bathed in the pale light of the moon that had finally broken through the clouds. The piano, though covered in a thick layer of dust, still retained an air of elegance. James approached it, his fingers brushing against the keys. Without warning, a single note rang out, startling everyone. "What just happened?" Sarah asked, her voice edged with fear as she stared at James. I don't know. Maybe the piano is just old and the keys are loose," James suggested, though his heart was beginning to race with unease. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and a gust of wind swept through, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. The silence was broken by the sound of the piano, now playing a haunting, sorrowful tune that seemed to reverberate through their very souls. "We need to get out of here, now!" Lucy cried, her voice trembling with fear as she fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The piano continued to play, each note echoing with a deep sense of loss and despair, as if someone or something was pouring all their sorrow into the music. James tried to turn his flashlight back on, but it flickered and died. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in the darkness with the unseen pianist. Someone is in here with us, Tom whispered, his voice shaking as he stared at the piano. They turned their eyes back to the grand instrument, and to their horror, a ghostly figure materialized next to it. It was a woman, her long, dark hair hanging down, obscuring most of her face, dressed in a flowing white gown that seemed to belong to another century. She sat at the piano, her delicate fingers moving gracefully over the keys, playing a mournful melody that resonated with unbearable sadness. James felt his heart seize as he realized that the figure was Emily, the tragic pianist whose spirit was said to haunt the mansion. She didn't acknowledge their presence, her entire focus on the piano as she played. The music wrapped around them like a shroud, suffocating them with the weight of her sorrow. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the haunting beauty of the music. Tom and Lucy stood frozen in terror, unable to move or speak, their eyes locked on the ghostly figure. James knew they were in grave danger, and he had to do something to save them. Summoning every ounce of courage, he approached the piano, though fear clawed at his insides with every step. He reached out a trembling hand, intending to touch the ghostly woman, but as soon as he got close, a fierce wind blew through the room, forcing him back. Emily's head slowly turned toward James, and for the first time her eyes met his. They were empty, hollow voids that seemed to draw in all light, filled with a deep, abiding hatred. Her lips parted, but no sound came out, only a trickle of dark, viscous blood that began to drip down her chin. James staggered back in horror, his heart pounding in his chest. But before he could react, Emily vanished, leaving only the echo of her sorrowful melody lingering in the air. The door behind them suddenly burst open, and the group didn't hesitate. They bolted from the room, not daring to look back. They ran through the mansion and out into the night, not stopping until they had escaped the overgrown garden and reached the safety of the street. Gasping for breath, they looked back at the mansion, their hearts still pounding with terror. We just saw a real ghost," Tom stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at the decaying structure. James looked back at the mansion, a haunted expression on his face as he spoke. "She's still there, playing her sorrowful melodies because she can never move on." From that night on, none of them ever returned to the mansion. They kept the story to themselves, too terrified to share it, but the memory of Emily's empty eyes and her ghostly music would haunt them forever. The mansion still stands, shrouded in shadow and mystery, its haunted past continuing to fuel the ghostly tales that spread through the neighborhood. And on every moonless night, the sorrowful strains of a piano can still be heard, echoing through the empty halls, a reminder that some secrets are better left undiscovered.